Welcome to COIQ, where you learn how health innovators maximize their success. I'm your host, Dr. Roxy, founder of Legacy DNA and international best-selling author of How Health Innovators Maximize Market Success. Through candid conversations with health innovators, early adopters, and influencers, you'll learn how to bring your innovation from idea to startup to market domination. And now, let's jump into the latest episode of COIQ. Welcome to the show, COIQ listeners. On today's episode, I have Fereydoun Taslimi, the CEO of SensorCall. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
I am so glad to have this conversation with you today.
Great.
So let's start off. I do this on every episode. Let's start off just by telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I was born in Iran. As a child, I went to England, did my high school and undergraduate there from University of London, came to US, went to Georgia Tech for postgraduate work. In the middle of the studies, I left. I formed several companies. Some of them went public, some of them were sold. And a couple of years ago, I saw the agony that my wife was going through looking after her mom that lives right down the road from us. And basically that prompted me to create a device that looks after seniors who are independent and they like to live in their own home and be able to bring some form of peace of mind to the caregivers. So that's basically how SensorCall started.
So let's definitely spend some time talking about even just kicking this off a little bit differently of what are some lessons that you've learned over the years in going from an idea to full market adoption, and it sounds like even to all the way through exit.
Well, as an entrepreneur, you have to be extremely positive, and there are a lot of obstacles on your way. Basically, every turn and every twist is an obstacle. You just have to be able to overcome them. And there are a lot of naysayers. But on the other hand, you need to vet your idea. You need to talk to as many people as you can. Don't completely fall in love with your idea to the point that you can't see, beyond reasons or miss things.
Yeah.
So it's very important. When I first started with SensorCall, it was a device that basically did a lot of things. So when I started talking to people, when I mentioned different features that it had, a lot of the features were not of interest to people. But then when I said, hey, it's something that looks after your parents, they said, oh, wait a minute, I'm interested in that. So one of the things it actually did was if you had a roof leak, it would tell you there is a roof leak, and roof leak can be very expensive. But people were not interested in that. So you, as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to pivot and pivot quickly. You have to be able to listen to people, and you have to basically vet your ideas and don't be so entrenched in your idea to the point that you can't see some of the things that are happening.
So that is such valuable wisdom right out of the gate. I love it. So, I imagine that for every venture that you have led, including the one today with SensorCall, that, each one is different. The market's different, the market conditions are different. So what's different about bringing SensorCall to market beyond COVID, right? Because you didn't have a global pandemic to deal with in your previous ventures. But beyond COVID, what's different in this commercialization process that you're doing?
Well, all my previous companies generally has been B2B in B2B space. This particular device is kind of a B2C, and at least that's how initially we are marketing it. We like to be able to get it into people's hand, have them try it, get some feedback, and be able to collect some data, and from that be able to expand on its capabilities. So that definitely is different to be able
Mm-hmm.
to market directly to people. And the other thing is this particular product happened to have almost the entire technology stack. It has hardware, it has embedded software, so you have to have completely different skill sets as far
Yeah.
as software designers are concerned. Then you have backend, then you have API, you have the app that we have to develop. And in addition, you have the machine learning and AI and so on. So it's quite a broad range of technology stack that you have to deal with, and you have to bring in all these different skill sets into one place,
Yeah.
and to be able to come up with a product that really does what you intend to do with the product.
Sure. So kind of just thinking back, because I like having, the historical perspective and point of view before we dig into, what's happening now. Can you think of a story that, or an experience where, there was some, either, an example of like just sheer luck, that where you just happen to be in the right place at the right time, meet the right person, that led to your success? Or was there a decision that you made that you think is just was really a factor in your success previously?
Well, I think luck has a lot to do with one's success, but the ability to be able to pivot, I think, is extremely important. But you also have to have the ability or develop the ability to be able to see that. To give
Yeah.
you an example, in early 80s, I developed a smart switch. It was a voice switch. I was looking for a phone system. I couldn't find it. I couldn't find something that I liked. And I noticed that they don't have any features, or most of the features were difficult to use. So I started developing a phone system, which actually worked with a PC, had a lot of interesting features. You pick up a phone, it would talk to you. Again, this was in early,
Wow.
it was 83, 80, 84. But I tried to market it. This was hardware. It was not easy.
Mm-hmm.
I found a venture partner, but it fell through. Then I realized and it was basically draining all my resources. So I realized I can't really go ahead and finish the product the way I want and sell hardware. So I decided to pull some software out of it. And one of the simplest software was a call accounting package, which was in the system. I pulled that out and I put a little ad in one of the telecommunication magazines. It was like a few $100. And within a week, I had about $5,000 or $6,000 in orders.
What?
Yeah, and then I said, wait a minute, this is software, very easy to use, and so on. So I completely pivoted, left the hardware part of it, and started basically expanding on the software that we had developed. From there, we went into voice processing, interactive voice response systems, predominantly software-based. So those are the moments that if you don't capitalize on it, you basically can go down too.
Yeah. Yeah. So Fereydoun, that is so incredible, because I think that a lot of people, or maybe not a lot of people, but I think some people think that if they have to pivot, that there's something wrong. Like that maybe is like a sense of failure. Like if I had to pivot from my original business strategy or business plan. And it sounds like what you're saying is that it's just par for the course. Embrace the pivot.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you have to decide what is important. Is success is important, or be able to go on a path that you may end up falling off the cliff.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and I think what you describe is really product market fit. And there's a lot of famous examples out there: Facebook, Twitter, Starbucks. If we dig into any of those stories, they're very much what you just described. They were one thing. A lot of them were facing those crossroads, right? Where it's kind of like, oh, this is not working. And whatever solution pivot they came up with end up being the secret to their success.
Exactly.
Profound. Yeah. So, with that, how are you pivoting now with Sensor Call compared to your pre-COVID strategy?
Well, it's kind of interesting. We had a call from somebody in India, and they were asking, "Can we use your product to be able to tell people they're staying in their home?" I mean, which is basically our device can do that, which was interesting from the point of view that here is a device that uses its sensors to be able to extract certain information. So when we look at that, there's a lot of interesting things we can do. Let me give you an example. We have a microphone there. We don't listen to people's sentences. We don't try to understand what it is they're talking about.
Right.
Potentially, we can detect cough. So right now, if you Google Corona cough, you find out there's a bunch of companies are actually working on things like this. So for a moment, just imagine a device that uses its senses to try to build a pattern of certain behaviors from a health point of view, and see if we can match that against a potential ailment or pandemic or whatever. So from that point of view, I think there's an interesting opportunity, something that we are actually looking at. For example, if you, in the case of COVID, you have, maybe you get diarrhea, you go to the bathroom a lot, you don't sleep properly. So if we can build those patterns, very similar to a antivirus software. Mm-hmm. So what is an antivirus software? They build these signatures. So we build these signatures of certain patterns and be able to map those out in a kind of a anonymously. So in other words, you don't know from the geographic point of view. So it could very well be a device that can look at the patterns that try to be predictive from the point of view of preventing it. Because they say in the case of COVID-19, if you can catch certain some of these signs early on, maybe you can stay home. You don't try to spread it. At the same time, for people who are in a high risk category, maybe you can get to the hospital a little quicker. In fact, get on the ventilator quicker. They can survive. The survival rate is much higher. So there's a lot of interesting opportunities that we're looking at that potentially that our device can be of help.
So I think that's remarkable. We're seeing, and I think we'll continue to see even more. And I guess this is a great segue into more into the COVID conversation and those pivot opportunities. But, we're seeing that these elderly facilities are in a lot of ways hotspots. And I think we're seeing that identified and publicly kind of announced and shared in some countries. And I think we'll see even more and more of that as the data starts to come to light. And I think that being able to mitigate those types of institutions and having a really good, solid plan, and of course, being able to leverage technology in those environments is huge. I think that that's something that could have real global impact and save lives.
Well, absolutely. There are some really fascinating databases out there. A friend of mine in the University of Washington actually once showed me this database that based on your zip code, you can actually pull out all the different diseases, all the different ailments in that area. So if you are a person, I'll give you an example, you're asthmatic, for example. And if the pollen level and so on goes up in certain areas, we could potentially notify the person, hey, look, the pollen is high. Our device can go red or whatever, some other color, and tell the person maybe you want to stay home. So there are certain things that potentially can be done to prevent, certain ailments.
So are you looking at pivoting to the B2B market?
Oh yeah, definitely. We've in the beginning when we first started, it was B2C, but then after talking to a whole bunch of people, B2B market is quite big, particularly in the area of senior monitoring, for example. A lot of people don't like these pendants. Basically, it's an advertisement that I'm old and I'm feeble, so they don't like it. So the next best thing is some form of a passive monitoring.
Yeah. I can see that really being quite powerful. Hey, it's Dr. Roxy here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed, without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit. So where are you in the innovation process right now?
Well, we are actually we are starting the lead generation. Actually, we started it this week. We're planning out our crowdfunding campaign, and we're pulling information together. We ran into some problem because of the COVID-19. For example, we were doing a video. In the video, we needed some seniors as actors and so on. But right now, nobody wants to act. Nobody wants to come out. So we have some issues that we have to resolve.
So I had a call with a notary yesterday because I have something that I need to get notarized, and 3 different places told me that all of their witnesses that they would have to notarize a document are elderly and they can't get them to come out. Don't want to encourage it either. And so I don't know how I'm going to get anything notarized.
Exactly. So there are some issues that we have to resolve. And at the same time, we are testing our messaging. Because these are periods that a lot of people have started thinking about their parents, their wellness, and so on. So is this an opportunity that we can look at and be able to take advantage of it? So that's the other thing we're looking at.
So that's really interesting because, the messaging is such a fundamental piece to any commercialization success and really any business, right? I mean, without having a solid, effective, clear, concise, compelling message, you're going to have challenges. And I probably have interviewed or talked to clients, I don't know, maybe about 40 in the last few weeks, and not one of them's talked about testing their messaging. Because, whatever your messaging was pre-COVID is pretty much garbage.
Exactly. Yeah. You need to be cognizant of the situation.
Yeah.
Because there are certain things you have to consider. I think people are concerned from the financial point of view. So one of the question is, are people willing to pay for certain things? And that's the other thing that you have to watch out.
Yeah.
But then, at the same time, you don't want to exploit the situation. In fact, there are some advertisers who don't want to be next to these COVID-19 articles or things like that because they're just too negative.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a definitely, I think, a delicate balance. Everyone that I've talked to is pretty adamant about not positioning their company as someone who is trying to take advantage or, gouge people by any means. And at the same time, I think that we have a social responsibility to communicate and make available those solutions that we have that can save people's lives. So we have to be able to feel comfortable selling it and making money, because we're supporting ourselves, we're supporting our team members, right? When we keep the lights on. But, we're not selling sleazy, snake oil here, right? We're selling something really valuable.
Exactly. I was looking at this site the other day. It's a manufacturer of a connected thermometer. So basically, as you measure your temperature, it sends it out to the cloud, and it puts it on a map. So you can look at the map and you can see where the temperature of the people has gone up or changed. And it pretty well coincides with the areas where the virus is spreading. But that to me is extremely useful.
Yeah, completely. And we don't want those people not talking about their solutions. We want them to let the whole world know, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So how do you think this pandemic is affecting or will affect the healthcare industry and entrepreneurs that are in this market?
Well, as far as the startups are concerned, it's probably been has had the most effect, because in our co-working environment, it's basically an incubator. Probably about 20-30% of them went out of business. And at this time, you can't raise any funds.
Yeah.
And nobody is thinking about any investments. So that definitely has a devastating effect on the startups. So there's a lot of negative that you have to think about how to overcome. So then certain habits will change. As far as the healthcare is concerned, people are much more comfortable with telemedicine now. So all the companies that in some shape or form are in telemedicine or being able to provide video conferencing, they're doing much better. And again, the companies that can look at the environment, look at the situation and say, the product I have in what shape or form can provide a service in this environment, I think those are the ones that are going to be extremely successful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I've had a lot of pivot conversations over the last 30, 45 days, and it's exactly what you said. Whether it's just pivoting my sales strategy because I can't get in front of people face to face anymore, or whether it's pivoting my customer market or my entire business model, there's a lot of opportunities in different facets of the business to pivot and change. And I think being able to take time out and think about all of those different scenarios and what's the best path, I think is really critical to surviving.
Right.
Yeah. So is that something that you guys have sat down and have done as a team?
Oh yeah. I mean, we talk about it almost every week.
Yeah. And so is it a one and done pivot strategy, or is it an ongoing pivot strategy?
It's ongoing, because you have to be able to see what is happening in what area. And again, you don't pivot for the sake of pivot. You have to be able to offer something.
Right. Yeah. Because I think, and that's just so important, because I think that, this is probably not aligned with the true definition of pivot, but maybe one of those things, like those 20 or 30% that you talked about, like part of their pivot decision was, okay, when I examine everything, I go, you know what, the reality is that we're not relevant and we don't have a sustainable runway. And so we need to close the doors. So I don't know if I would call that a pivot, but there's definitely a major change in the business. And that is, being able to make that decision sooner than later is just as critical.
Well, a lot of the startups that basically have a limited runway, And some of them starting January, February, start trying to see if they can raise funds for next end month. And then when things like this happen, basically closes all the doors. And the question is, a startup that basically runs out of money, what do they do? So they either have to go back to garage or figure out some other ways of raising funds.
Yeah. So speaking of some other ways of raising funds, I'm seeing a lot of crowdfunding that is happening. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's interesting because I just heard that Kickstarter laid off, I think 20-30% of their staff. So I'm not sure how crowdfunding is actually behaving right now. Now,
I don't know if it's successful, but I hear a lot of people are trying it. Like, I can't go to typical investment community, so I'm trying to, raise money in other ways.
Right. So maybe that's what they're doing. They're trying it anyway and see if that works. So maybe they just don't have any other avenues. In our case, what we are trying to do with crowdfunding is to be able to get more people test our product, give us feedback, do beta tests, and collect some more data.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So what would you say is the biggest challenge for you guys that you can anticipate, maybe now, but maybe also in the future, as we're still trying to figure out how this pandemic is going to affect the world?
Well, one of the challenges is manufacturing right now. We had picked one manufacturer in the U.S. and a couple of manufacturers overseas. The one in the U.S. that just laid off a whole bunch of people. So I'm not sure it's somebody that we want to be able to use.
Yeah.
In overseas, the one manufacturer that we feel comfortable with is in China. But it also means we can't really travel down there right now. We can't really visit the factory. We're lucky in the sense that our main engineer has been to the factory. He knows these people. If that was not the case, then it would be extremely difficult to pick a manufacturer that you have not visited. And most of the time, all the stories I hear with the hardware, you really need to be there. When they first produce that first batch, you have to be there. So if you can't be there, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And the other problem is, it's not just China. I mean, the question is it safe to go to Far East right now and visit these factories? I don't know. That's the other issue.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's just it. There's so much that we don't know. Right? Just both on a personal level and a professional level. There's uncertainty everywhere that we look.
Right. I mean, you're talking about from the component point of view. You're not sure you can get all the components. Some of these factories had to shut down. So will you be able to get the components? And packaging. One packaging company we were talking to, I can't get a response from. So and again, the marketing, you're right. I mean, the number of unknowns have dramatically increased.
Yeah. So how would you compare that? Because kind of like you had indicated before, I mean, being an entrepreneur is not easy street, right? You have to be a certain level of crazy to make this your career. I'm not calling you crazy.
To some extent, there is a certain amount of craziness. As an entrepreneur, as I said, you have to be incredibly optimistic.
Yeah.
So when you see an arrow coming towards you, you must assume that it's not going to hit you. Period. Okay. Yep. And when it gets close to you, you hope that maybe you can, try to dodge it. So. The whole idea of or the thing with entrepreneur is you have to be able to overcome obstacles after obstacles. And as an entrepreneur, you have these obstacles on a daily basis. So what makes basically the difference between a successful entrepreneur and an unsuccessful one is how you can handle these situations. And this is a good test for all of us right now.
Yeah, I read a quote, and I don't know if I will remember it exact, but a professor from Harvard says that you can tell the success of an entrepreneur by the number of arrows in his ass.
That's a pretty good one. Absolutely.
And I thought, I love that. That is so true.
Yeah. I mean, we all know that there isn't much to learn from success, but there's a lot to learn from failure. So,
isn't that true?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, speaking of that, what additional lessons learned or wisdom do you have, as we wrap up here? There's so many entrepreneurs that are in healthcare that are, in the trenches like you are, trying to figure this out, trying to figure out where they have what it takes to survive and thrive. What advice do you have for them?
Well, I mean, if you want to start a company, you really have to start with yourself. Are you ready? Are you financially ready? If you're married, you need to talk to your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
Is she ready? And what kind of a runway you have?
Yeah.
Are you willing to fail? And if you fail, what are the consequences? I mean, last thing you want to do is basically screw up your marriage.
Right.
And those are the things that you have to ask yourself. And that to me is the most important one, because as an entrepreneur, you are going to have all kinds of problems, and the last thing you want to have is problem at home.
Yeah, you need a support system.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a very lucky person in the sense that my wife is extremely supportive, and that is not an issue. It doesn't even come up even one iota.
Right. Yeah.
So you need to figure those things out before you really jump, because I always tell people an entrepreneur is somebody who dives down and then looks down, see if there is water down there. And on the way down, you have to figure out how you're going to land.
Right. Wow, that is just such a beautiful analogy of, what all of us, like you said, what all of us really know to be true, but we are in the fire. We are being tested like never before, or at least not in the last 100 years. And I completely agree. My husband is very supportive, and you need to have someone that's not adding arrows, that they're helping you take them out.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a great conversation. I love, as you shared, the lessons that you've learned in your previous successes and your previous challenges, and how you've taken all of that into, your new company, Sensor Call, and how that's made a difference for you. And then just how you're navigating as a seasoned entrepreneur, how you're navigating this, pandemic that we're all facing. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So how can our listeners get a hold of you if someone wants to follow up with you after the show?
My email is Fereydoun@sensorscall.com. That's Fereydoun, sensorscall.com. Or just go to the sensorscall.com website.
Perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and your attention. To save time and get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who's been sharing the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of COIQ.